to different topics. We're going to cover different topics. That's why it's important that every day during the bootcamp, you end with practice and practice and practice. So that material that we studied yesterday will be curved into your understanding and mindset that day. There's a gap that is created now between just reviewing the materials with me and actually remembering it and using it during for your exam. So I ask you to go ahead and do the practice any free time you have between yesterday and Friday throughout the week, and definitely after this. But after this, you won't be in a bootcamp. So do it while you're in the bootcamp. While we're here, you can ask questions. You can challenge the group, and it's a great opportunity for you to actually remember and fully understand the material, because there's a lot more than what we cover here that you will need to deal with later on. Okay, so do it now. Um, don't let yourself slide there and avoid the practice, or do the bare minimum of practice. No, you need to practice on every domain we cover. Today we're going to finish domain 1. That's what we're going to do this morning in this first session, and then we're going to move to domain 2. Domain 2 is going to require only one session between us, right? It's not too complicated, and most of domain 2 was already covered when we talked about data classification in domain 1. And then later on today, in the afternoon, we're going to cover domain 3. We're going to start talking about cryptography. That's one of the most tricky, one of the trickiest areas of the CISSP, since it has so many and so many areas that the normal security guy cannot remember all of it. So there are lots of tips and tricks there of how to remember and how to understand the question, the answers, and to connect it to. Okay, so I will need you sharp this afternoon. So eat a light lunch. Okay, don't go for a burger or something like that. Keep the heavy meal for later on tonight. Today we're going to cover cryptography, and that's a huge one. That's a huge one in the CISSP. A lot of people are really afraid of this area, and it intimidates them, and they avoid taking the CISSP just because of that session of cryptography. They're like, I'm not a cryptography specialist. I'm not a cyber cryptography expert. I'm going to avoid that. I'm going to go for something easier. What I'm saying is that if so many people pass the CISSP, there's no reason why you will not pass the CISSP, especially when you put the time and effort in a bootcamp like this one, and you have me, you have the group. There's no reason why you cannot deal with questions and the challenges that we have in the CISSP exam. Hi, Valentino. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. No, we cannot hear you, and we cannot see you actually, but that's fine. Yeah, now we can hear you, I think. Also wanted to mention just, yesterday, I think we started when I, or during the day, I shared the fact that 2 of my students actually took the exam yesterday and passed the exam. One of them 102 questions, one of them 105 questions, and that was awesome. But later on the day, I got notification from 2 other students who also took the exam yesterday, and both of them actually passed. And all 4 of them, it's 4 out of 4, which this is basically what we have in the group here. So what every one of them, and I talked to them last night. I wanted to get their feedback. I said, we're doing a bootcamp right now this week. What are the tips and tricks that you can give our current students? Because I do that with everyone, even if you fail or pass the CISSP exam. All this is valuable for the next students, the next group that will attend this training, and I'm trying to bring you from the experience of others, the best that I can do for you. So what all four conversations with all four of them passed the CISSP exam yesterday. Okay, it's not a week ago, it's not a year ago, it's yesterday. It's like you taking the exam next week, all right? All of them said, stick to the presentations. These presentations that you get and the booklets that I printed out for you guys and you have there, and all the tips and tricks that I share with you, and I'm saying, write this down here and write this down there. They said this saved their exam. They felt confident with these tips and tricks, and the fact that they had the risk formula carved in their brain made them feel secure when they got to these questions. So what I'm saying is that, guys, we have the opportunity here to pass the CISSP exam. You are my reputation, okay? So I'm doing everything I can to get you to pass the exam, but you need to do your legwork, okay? You need to look at the book, you need to get familiarized with the materials, you need to remember those areas that I tell you to remember, you need to write down the notes that I give you, and you need to go through the motions, okay? You will need to go through the motions, you will need to go through the exam itself. I will be here with you all the way to the exam and after the exam, celebrating hopefully on the first attempt. But even if not, I'm going to be there with you until the next attempt, until you tell me to basically stop and, ask me to stop bugging you about passing that exam or, becoming better in cybersecurity. So I think, yep, Shafa?
When do you recommend to take the test? Next week, next month?
All right, so from bootcamp to exam, the ideal time will be somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, so a month and a half from now ish. All right. Given the fact that you're actually practicing every day between 1 to 2 hours. Okay, you have that printout of the 8 weeks before your exam that I shared with you, right? You have that that one page with all the links and everything there. So again, put the time, put the effort. You're on the right track. You're getting all the tools that you need now to pass the exam, and you have me as your mentor. Hopefully, I'll be able to help you and advance you to where you want to be. But at the end of the day, it's yours. Okay, so I need you to put the time and effort, and I need to see you practice more and more and more, because that way you will get your CISSP. There's no other way. There's no magic out there. There's no shortcut. There are no brain dumps out there for the questions. Nothing. All the questions are new. Everything you deal with is new. It's the language that you learn. It's the method that you learn. And it's the way, the tips and tricks that you need to have memorized in order to deal with these questions and gain confidence. It's not an easy exam, but it's totally doable if you follow the plan of this bootcamp. All right, make sense, guys?
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, so yesterday, this was the ending slide for yesterday. And I would like to ask you, before we start, wrapping up domain one, any questions about yesterday, anything that came up between last night to this morning that, you realized that we didn't cover enough, or we didn't cover enough, or something that was missing here and there?
First of all, I did the exams
Yeah, I've seen that.
last night.
Yeah, I've seen that. And by the way, I want to say that, every one of you that is actually taking the exam on our system, I see the improvement.
No, it's amazing because I did it twice and I scored 80 and 85,
Yeah.
I think the questions that I didn't know were questions that we didn't cover yet, most of it.
Right.
So
Those are the areas, we cover 95% of the material. This is the curve, all right? So we cover most of it, 95% of it. But there's this other 5 to 10% that you will need to go to the book, right? That's the edges of the material. So you'll need to go to the bootcamp. But this is covered. You will get the idea of what other areas are in the edges when you take the practice exams. When you take the practice questions, you realize, okay, we didn't study this. I'll go to the book and I'll find out that area, that paragraph or two, and cover that area as well. Okay, so that's why I want you to practice. That's how you're going to complete the 100% of the material, right?
So, I mean, from my experience, yeah, I mean, the bootcamp really helped. I mean,
good.
You know how to deal with the questions.
Yeah.
You have the knowledge, you have the idea for what. I mean, of course, not for everything, but you have the idea to know what you need to look on those questions because you have the background. So this is good. Some things I noticed, for example, that you know the material, but the questions are framed in a different manner. For example, there was a question security triples, which we didn't touch this term, also operation security triples. And after I finished the test, I saw that it means I think it means the total risk, which means threats, vulnerabilities, and assets value, right? If I'm not,
yes.
Yeah. So the question is like, what is the right terms that you need to know? Because this is probably how it is called in the book, but you didn't in the presentation as this term.
Right. And again, it's here in the presentation, but you need to elaborate. You need to further read in the book. This is the way. This is the right way, Shachar. You run into a question. You remember we talked about that area, but it's not framed this way. That's when you go to the book. Because when you look at the book, the 1,600 pages, it all looks important. It all looks relevant for the CISSP. But guess what? Not all of it is as important. Yes, you need to know everything. But for me to cover the 1,600 pages, I think we will need to spend 2 months together and we will not even get there. So, you need to make sense of the time that you spend on preparing yourself. And a bootcamp is a bootcamp. It's 1 week, okay? You put the time, you put the effort, but then the bootcamp here directs you to where those areas that we didn't cover that much in the bootcamp, those areas that you can elaborate. You can go to the book and read more about them, okay, and get them, in place for you in your knowledge. So thank you, Shachar, about this. Anyone else want to share their experience after yesterday? Okay. So here we are today. We're going to complete domain. We're going to finish domain 1, which is again the most important domain of the CISSP. If you're not in good standing of domain 1, in good standing in your practice exams, 80, 85 and above. Okay, do not go and take the exam yet. First, you need to be there. That's your measurement. That's your metric. When you hit 85% and up in domain 1 in your practice exams, that's when you can register for the CISSP exam. That's when everything else will fall into place. And you will see that today, as we move from domain 1 to domain 2, things kind of start repeating themselves. The whole idea of data classification, for example, we're going to touch it from another angle, but again, it's going to look the same. So domain 1 is the base of everything in the CISSP. Okay, later on, domain 3, you will see again digital signature and cryptography, and we mentioned that yesterday just a little bit. We're going to take a deeper dive, but if I can connect all other 7 domains, 2 to 8, they're all in some way connected to domain 1. That's the base. Okay, so domain 1, we're going to wrap up domain 1 today, and take the practice exams. This is your part during this weekend. All right, so we did talk about ROI and TCO, and we mentioned the total cost of ownership, and ROI is measured with percentage. The idea behind the ROI and TCO is to quantify the benefit of the control implementation. However, a control is just one phrase that can be related to as a control as we know it, but it's also referred to as a countermeasure. Okay, so in your CISSP, ISC can say this is your countermeasure or this is your control. To us today, it sounds the same. Control, countermeasure, it sounds the same, but it's not. Okay, so what I want you to think of when we talk about control, it's more of the control before something happens. I'm not that excited about calling it preventive control because there can be a preventive, detective, directive, corrective controls, and others. But it's more the control we have in place when we anticipated that something will happen. So a detective control, a SIM system, will be configured the way we know the behavior of our network, all right? Make sense? The control, when I say control, is something that I anticipated to happen, and that's why I have this measure there, okay? The countermeasure is another type of control, but it's the control for something I didn't anticipate that will take place. For example, you're all familiar with this water device. I hope you're all familiar with it. It's called Tami 4, Tami Alba in Israel. I think there's another name for it in Europe, but it's all basically the same. So the button here, are you all familiar with it? You all seen it, right? No?
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, Chen, in the last 2 weeks, I'm searching for a minibar like this that can be connected directly to the water. And here it's shit. You can't find the normal one. The only thing you can find is the stupid one with the buttons.
Oh, wow. Really?
I think
Wow.
about Tami 4 from Israel and bring it to here. So if you're coming, tell me.
Yeah. Get yourself Tami 4. That's a great one. We have it in the house. Yeah, have it for I think 3 or 4 years now.
You don't need one here in
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Check your water. It's one thing it's what you read in the news, and it's a totally different thing what you have in the tap.
Yeah. Okay. So bear with me for a second. I'll explain how this one works. It's not magic. It's just water facility, water device. So this water device is connected to a pipe. Okay. It's also connected to electricity. You set the amount of water, okay, the amount of milliliters that you want for each glass. So you have your glass, you have the measurement, and you say, okay, I want 180 milliliters in each glass. Okay, perfect. You press this button here, and you say, I want a cup, and it fills your cup. Okay, but what if something happened there? What if the configuration is now messed up, and instead of 180, it pours 200? Then what happens? Then the glass is getting full, and then the water goes above and then spill, right? That's why you have this tray down here for something unexpected to happen. You put the glass, if you push the button, everything goes well. This tray here is not effective. We don't need it. Okay, we need it if something unexpectedly happens in our operation. Do you see that? You all see that? Yeah? So this one, the button here is the control, and the tray here, okay, to collect the spilled water is your countermeasure. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. One of you, let's take it to an example of network security, of information security. Okay, give me an example for a countermeasure. In the description of a countermeasure, when we talk about this one, when we give this example, do you have any idea of maybe an example for a countermeasure in sharing files and folders or anything that can probably prevent the expansion of the impact in an unexpected event? Can any one of you think of an example there?
Yes, when you're adding 30% of your budget on top of the budget. It's countermeasure.
Valentino, do you want to try? Carlo,
Yeah,
you want to give it a try?
I would say, for instance, in Office 365, you can implement a policy that says if there's an exceptional growth of files being deleted,
Mm-hmm.
it can notify you, or it can lock it down and say no more files deleted,
Mm-hmm.
so that somebody doesn't come in and delete everything.
Right, so it deletes only a certain amount of files at a time. Perfect.
Yes, yeah.
Perfect.
So if you delete 10 files and you come to number 11, it tells you no, you're not allowed to, and it
Perfect.
sends out a
Valentino,
notification.
let me ask you another question. Under CINA, where would you categorize this type of control that you just described?
Integrity.
Integrity? Is it data integrity? Maybe it's
Yeah, I would.
availability?
It's
Well,
confidentiality.
I think it's more availability than integrity or confidentiality, because files are deleted, they're not available anymore. So your control is trying to prevent
accidental deletion of too many files.
destruction. Do you remember the DAD from yesterday?
Yes, yes, yes.
So it tries to prevent or try to compensate on destruction. Okay? So you will not lose everything. And that's a countermeasure. That's a great example, Valentino. Okay? That's a countermeasure. It's not a control. A control will be to say, no, you cannot delete these files. Or if you delete these files, then we keep the logs. We know who did it. We have accountability. Right? But
Yes.
it's more than the appetite that I have for the risk takes place. That's when we have countermeasures. Okay, so ISC can ask you about control, and they can ask you about a countermeasure. If they ask about the differences between the two, countermeasure is there to compensate on something that is unexpectedly happens, and the control is designed to deal with the expected situations. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay, so talk about more about controls and measures. The types of controls that we can have are basically these three categories: preventive control, detective control, and corrective control. Okay, I'm sure you all know the differences between them, right? Prevention, trying to stop things from happening. Detective is when prevention failed and we couldn't stop anything, something from happening. We want to detect, we want to know about it. And then as we know about it, we want to fix it. We want to correct the situation. We want to go back to normal. Okay, that's where the main three categories. And those categories fall into the types of controls: administrative controls, so we can have preventive, detective, and corrective controls. Under administrative controls, which are the directive controls, right? We mentioned that yesterday, the policies, procedures, and anything that is considered soft controls, okay? And then we can have technical controls, which ISC can refer to as logical control as well, right? Do you see that? Administrative control can be referred to as directive control. Technical control can be referred to as logical control. And the third group is physical control, okay? So again, the matrix is administrative, technical, physical, preventive, detective, corrective controls, all right? Are we all there?
This
Right.
was one of the questions in the test exam.
Right, yes. There's going to be a lot of questions about that, but those questions, when they ask about the types of controls and the combination, those questions are probably level 3 and down, okay? 3, 2, 1. I don't see any question here because it's pretty straightforward. I don't see any level 4 or 5 type of questions here. It might include some information about this or that control, this or that type of control in the level 4 and 5 questions, right? So yes, we need to understand this, but this is pretty basic. Now, there can be a combination of controls. So we can say, okay, I have a preventive, for example, I have a preventive administrative control, all right?
Can you give an example of the combinations? Can you give a concrete example of each one of them?
Sure. Preventive administrative control is a policy that says no employee should use a thumb drive. Prevention, written control. However, we know that administrative controls are lacking teeth, right? That they don't have the way to enforce anything. So it's written, it's there, everybody should know about them. But if people choose not to follow that policy or choose not to follow that directive control, there's nothing really that control can do about it.
Mhm.
All right? There can be a detective administrative control. For example, if you see, or any employee that sees another employee uses thumb drive must report about this. So you use your workforce as detection mechanism, all right? And then corrective control, corrective administrative control can be a disciplinary action against an employee that actually used a thumb drive, all right? But again, all of these are administrative controls, lack of teeth, okay, lack of enforcement. All right, and then other combinations as well.
So the corrective control is only against the employee.
Come again?
The corrective control is only against the employee for the action he committed.
Okay, for this example, the threat vector was the employee. Do you see that? So the employee violated the policy. The policy says no thumb drive should be used. An employee violated that. Their neighbor at the cubic next to them saw them using a thumb drive. They reported the manager. The corrective action was to call that employee to the manager's office and go through disciplinary actions. Do you see that process, the preventive, detective, and corrective? This example is the employee, okay? Because the employee is the attack vector, is the threat, as we refer to, okay? Even though it's an employee, it becomes a threat now, all right? Okay. So preventive control, we said we want to prevent things from happening, but make it this must be an assumption for you as security personnel. Preventive controls will fail. Okay, they will not sustain and they will not do everything that it can. Okay, so this will fail. And when they fail, we want to know about it. Okay, we want to minimize the time that we have to know about this. The average time that we face today, the security world of information security, the average time from infection of a malware worldwide, from infection to detection, is 256 days, almost 9 months. Okay, so that's a very bad detection period. We want to shorten that. We want to aim to have a very short detective time or detective phase. So everything else after the detection takes place, everything else can happen. We can move to correction. We can move to recovering the business. We can have additional names for controls or additional controls under this main three, preventive, detective, or corrective, which this can be, part of the examples. For example, deterrent controls. Deterrent controls are, the sign that we can put on the door to say, I have a killer dog in the house. You open the door, you see this little chihuahua that is, barking their heart out. But it's a deterrent control. It's a sign, and it creates, it brings down the motivation of a threat. That's the deterrent control. However, a threat can ignore this deterrent control and say, I'm going for it, So deterrent control can be also referred to as discouraged control. I'll come to compensating control in a bit. I just want to get to, the other one. Compensating control is big in the CISSP. So the recovery and restore controls, or type of controls, are there to restore the business. Okay, so we're not looking at IT. Okay, so we cannot say if IT came back to normal, then the business came back to normal. Okay, CISSP wants us to think like business. Okay, so you always consider when we talk about recovery and restoration, we talk about the business. Okay, and that's for the restoration or restore controls. Now let's talk about compensating controls. Compensating controls is a very tricky one because countermeasures They sound like compensation control, right? Something bad happened and I didn't have the right control in place, so I have that control to compensate. In some way, it is true. Countermeasures can be compensating controls to an extent, okay? However, compensating controls can even start with the fact that says, I cannot, whatever I do, I cannot implement that original control, okay? So as a CISO, as a CISSP, if I run a risk assessment and one of the recommendation is to implement a DLP, data leakage prevention system, okay? And I run the discussion with my peers, with my boss, with senior management, and we all decide that DLP is not feasible at the moment. The need is still there. The risk is still there. So instead of implementing a DLP, I will implement compensating controls to address the risk in a different way. For example, I can write a policy against sharing information and leaking information from the organization. I can have all employees sign an NDA, okay? All employees and all workforce, including third parties, vendors and such. I can probably run mechanism to detect information where it shouldn't be. For example, I can run OneDrive analysis to detect where that information is and who this information is shared with. I can probably run some awareness training for all employees. Do you see what we're doing here? Not everything is feasible as it is initially after the risk analysis. We need to be able to take the results of the risk analysis and translate them into something that the business can actually deal with. And setting compensating controls means that you as CISSPs understand the business logic. The business will not always approve that original control that we want to implement. Sometimes the business will say, this original control cannot be implemented. And when I cannot implement that original control, I move to compensating controls, okay? This is also mentioned in laws and regulations and standards and PCI and ISO. It's mentioned everywhere. If you cannot implement that original control, you should consider implementing compensating controls because the objective is still there, right? It can be achieved with different controls. Is this part clear? Because this is very important. All right?
Yeah.
Okay, now move. Okay, yeah.
1 second. Can you give an example for deterrent control?
Yeah. For example, I mentioned the sign killer dog in the house. Okay? If you have this sign on my door at my house, you will probably knock before you open the door, right? Okay. That's a sign, this area is monitored and controlled, and we have CCTV everywhere. You will be discouraged to do what you plan on doing, right?
But CCTV is a good example because CCTV is also detectable.
Can be, but can also be. You can also have dummy CCTVs, so fake CCTV, right? But you make sure everybody sees that, and they're all sure it beeps. It has the red light, and it shows. It looks like a CCTV, but it's not connected to anything.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a deterrent control, discouraged controls. Okay. All right. Good. So again, going back to the combination, preventive, administrative control, that's the questions that you asked before, Shachar, and those are examples of preventive administrative controls. There can be another combination, preventive technical control, that's pretty obvious, pretty straightforward, and other controls as well. Just know that, there is a combination and you might be asked about a combination. Again, these questions are level 3 and below, 3, 2, and 1. I wouldn't spend that much time on them. If you fully understand that, then it's great. To wrap up the whole risk management chapter, which was really, really important for the CISSP, this is the framework that ISC put for risk management. First, we categorize the information systems, the assets that we have. Then we select the security controls. We implement them. we assess the security controls. Look at all the work that we have around security controls, okay? Remember, the risk management formula comes down to the controls, okay? And the framework of ISC touches mostly around the controls. We want to assess them, we want to implement them, we want to make sure we have the right controls, because this is the area that we can actually influence, okay? And then we authorize the information systems to do what they do, need to know list privileges, and we monitor the controls. We want to make sure the controls operate and as effective as we plan to have them, okay? So again, the whole framework is in direct connection to the risk formula which we started with, okay? Do you see that? Do you see the risk formula here? Great. Chapter number 3, we're moving fast. Chapter number 3 in our book is very short, relatively short, speaks about business continuity planning, which is a topic that will also be covered extensively when we talk about DRP in the BCP, disaster recovery planning, inside the business continuity planning in domain 7. So bear in mind that this will come back again, this issue, this topic will come back again later on in domain 7. But as mentioned, most, or if not all other domains, 2 to 8, are connected in some way to domain 1. So for BCP, there are 4 steps toward BCP, business continuity planning. The main idea behind business continuity planning, the goal is to get operation flowing, uninterrupted, okay, working properly. This is what we're looking for. We're not there to make sure the firewall works. I don't care about antivirus here or there, okay? Technical language is not the language you want to use in business continuity. So when you get questions about business continuity, think business. My business needs to make money, okay? How do I go back from in business interruption to making my next dollar, right? That's where you want to put your state of mind, okay, as you address those questions for the business continuity. So the 4 steps, the 4 phases are these 4: project scope and planning. We always plan before we move forward with an initiative. Business impact analysis, which is big. We basically ask, what is the impact on the business, okay? What is the impact, worst case scenario, on our business? Where will the business get affected with making the next dollar, the next money that we plan on doing? And then according to the BIA, we do the continuity planning, okay? We understand the impact on the business, now we can do the continuity planning. And then as any other project, any other plan, we need to get the approval and implementation with senior management. This is a change, okay? So if you remember the change management process, 9 steps yesterday, this is a change. Okay, we have an initiative for a change, we have the need for a change, we plan the change, we go to the board, we get approval, we implement the change, and then we report back. All right, do you see that here? All right, good. First step, project scope and planning. Planning the project called BCP, Business Continuity Planning, is all about the understanding of the business, the team. You need to choose the right team, you need to create the right team, you need to have the resources. It's just like any other project. So those of you that have some sort of training around PMP or project management can really relate to this, because this language is taken from project management. Okay, so before we move forward, we need to know that management is with us, we have the right people, we have the right resources, money, budget, and so on, before we can move forward. There's also a big component in business continuity, which is the legal and compliance area. Because in business continuity, we have a lot of obligations of the business, and what we're doing is business interruption, okay? So assuming that our business serves clients, right? Any business serves any type of clients. If we serve the clients and part of our contract with them is addressing this part, in a situation where we cannot provide the services that we signed on, then we can potentially get into some sort of a contractual violation. And this is something big, okay? As a business, not only that we can face the interruption of the business, but now we can face lawsuits, okay? And fines by regulators. So you always want to have legal next to you when you do business continuity planning, okay? Your legal department must be part of this because of contractual obligations. So as you analyze the business, you need to ask yourself, what are the areas that bring most of the money to the business? And by analyzing those areas, you now need to look at the systems and data that supports them. So if I take you back to the risk formula, the impact, right? The impact was analyzed based on system. The source of the impact could be system or data, right? Do you remember this? We talked about that yesterday. Here you ask the question from another angle, okay? I understand the business operation where we make money. So what are the system and data that support this business unit or business operation? Make sense, everybody? Are you with me?
Mhm.
Okay. As you understand the business, you need to choose the right team members. You need to put the right team next to you in order for you to be able to provide that business continuity. The team is made of representatives from operational and support, IT, security personnel with business continuity skills. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean cyber experts, but people that understand business. For example, CISSP certified. Okay, and again, senior management must always be with you, and legal department. You always want to have legal department next to you. As you run through, building your business continuity plan, you want to make sure that everything is tested. Everything is tested before something happens. You don't want to face that, that incident for the first time, the real life incident, the first time before you tested your plan. You must test your plan and improve it to get to have that plan at best before that incident takes place. And of course, senior management is always with us. In terms of legal and regulatory analysis, the requirement analysis, you must consider all regulatory analysis, all regulations and laws that are relevant to your business. Okay, so for example, in the States, the CISSP is an American certification, right? Even though it's a global thing, it's based on the American market. So for example, in the States, you can have federal laws, right, for the entire United States, but then you can have state laws. And in the state, you can have local laws of your county, of your local government. So your legal advisor must consider all these areas, okay? If my business operates in Germany, now I need to consider the GDPR for EU, the local laws in Germany, and I don't know if you have local laws inside Germany, but this must be considered as well. This region versus that region, this county versus that county. The legal department must consider all of them because we don't want to be in any regulatory violation with regulators. We don't want to add pressure on the business when we go through that business interruption. The business impact analysis, the business impact assessment, is also referred to as quantified and qualified. So the qualitative risk business impact analysis is again looking at the high, medium, low impact of that interruption on the business. And the quantitative assessment or impact assessment is again putting numbers. Both of these together, the quantitative and qualitative, must contribute to a decision-making process. Okay, they must contribute to a decision-making process of your management. because you are not the one, the CISO, the CISSP is not the one to make decisions here. You're just there to collect the information. And how do you collect the information? You go through these 5 steps. You identify the priorities, you do the risk identification based on everything that we learned so far, likelihood / probability, impact, and then resource prioritization, the way I'm going to deal with it, okay? So this is basically the risk formula all over again. The continuity planning comes down from strategy all the way down to training and education. So you plan your strategy, you have your provision and processes, get the approval, you implement the plan, you see that it works right, you test it, you learn from your tests and improve it, and then you go to training and education of the involved parties. If you have a third party, if you have a vendor that is part of it, you want to include them in your training, in your education, okay? So all personnel must take this training. Everyone that can affect the continuity of your operation, the continuity of the business, must be part of this training, must be part of this business continuity design. And the fourth and the last part of your business continuity planning is to get the approval and implementation of the plan. Everything starts and ends with documentation. Okay, you want to have senior management with you all the way. So report at every step of the way and give them the full picture of your business continuity planning, what you're planning to do, what they can expect in terms of business interruption, the scenarios, the risk scenarios that you're going to address, and most importantly, what will not be restored immediately. So as you go through business impact analysis, you want to let senior management know this is higher priority than that one. For example, you have Exchange server or your Exchange system for emails, and you have ERP system for business management. Business thinks, or senior management thinks, that emails are the most important part of the business, right? Without the email system, our business will not survive. Well, you run your business impact analysis and you look at the numbers and you look at the contribution of that system versus that one, and you realize that the ERP contributes far more money and growth to your business than the email system, okay? You bring this in front of your management, and then they see the full picture and they understand how to prioritize everything that you do and everything that they support you in doing. So it's really important to be transparent with your management. And again, this is a good one. This is a, you know, it's they say that documentation prevents people or a person inside your team to say, oh yeah, I remember that. It's all in my head, you know. I got this for us. And the other one, the other syndrome called sit of the pants. Sit of the pants means that, you know, a person can say, don't worry about this. Business continuity, I've been through wars, you know, I'll get this covered for you. This is part of the CISSP. They actually mentioned that. Avoid those people that say "Yeh beseder" in Hebrew. Everything will be okay. Okay? So avoid that. Try to protect those areas. What? What's that?
Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna Matata, yes, Hakuna Matata. Those that tell you, Hakuna Matata, don't worry about it, you know, it's all going to be okay. You know, ask the questions. Don't let yourself go when you have that kind of person. This is a risk for you as a CISSP. This is a risk. You want to address that immediately. And then in BCP, we're talking about availability and, you know, dealing with business interruptions. That's why you want to create cross-training to all employees. This is not driven from fraud prevention, as we mentioned that yesterday, but this is driven more to create availability and backups. Okay, so train your team across the board and get more and more people involved, right? Not more and more stakeholders, people that can influence, but people that can actually do the operation of continuity. This chapter was very short. In your CISSP, you can expect couple of questions on BCP, on chapter 3, but I wouldn't anticipate more than that. That's why we kind of ran over it, right? So again, don't waste your time, don't waste too much time on chapter 3. Just remember the BCP principles, the 4 stages, the team building, support from senior management, and everything that we just talked about. Okay, that shouldn't be a difficult chapter to study, right? Okay, we're all good? Yeah. All right. Last chapter of domain 1. That's the chapter of laws, regulations, and compliance. In this chapter, you will probably need to remember a lot of details here and there, and there's no way, there's no easy way to remember this. Simply going and reading and elaborating as you go through the book, you know, reading further on those topics. The way we try to cover this here is to go one by one on the most important topics. But again, this will probably be on your CISSP as much as the BCP. 2, maybe 3 questions. You know what, I'll take it to the next level. 5 questions on the laws and regulations. But those questions will probably be under the memory questions, not the understanding of the questions. Okay, so it's not questions that we need to understand the logic behind them. It's more questions on the black and white, 1 or 0, okay, of the laws. You're not lawyers, you're not expected to be lawyers, maybe one of you is, but you're not expected to be a lawyer to take the CISSP exam. So it's basically memorizing the way it's structured. All right, so in laws and regulations and laws in general, we have 3 types of laws, right? 3 types in the US, 3 types of laws in the US, and I assume other places in the world as well. First type is criminal law. The result of criminal law is you can probably lose some of your basic freedoms. For example, the freedom to move, the freedom to speech, the freedom to own property, okay? So criminal law will probably affect some, if not all, of the individual freedom. That's why in order to get to the full conviction of that individual, 99% certainty is not enough, all right? There's always that, if there is a doubt, then even a criminal can go free if he cannot prove that they're 100% wrong, they're 100% guilty of that charge, okay? So that's the criminal law, that's the harsh law. So when you get your CISSP questions, answers, criminal 100% set, it needs to be right there. You need to catch the guy red-handed, you know, with pens on the keyboard and the message on the screen that, you know, they can prove that they actually did the crime. If you're not able to do that, criminal law is not your path. There is the other path, which is relevant to most questions, okay? It's the civil law. The civil law is basically solving a conflict between 2 parties, mainly by settling on money, okay, or monetary compensation between 2 parties. Here, 51% is enough, okay? If one side is a little more right than the other in the eyes of the judge, then that side wins the trial, okay? And that side gets compensated by the other party, you know, financially compensated. There is this third group of laws in the States, and I assume that other places in the world. It's called administrative laws. Those laws are for government agencies. They're not administrative controls. I know it can be confusing. Those administrative laws are for government agencies. It's laws for the government to keep us, the civilians, to keep our rights as civilians. So the government agencies will not violate our rights. Make sense, guys? So administrative laws are down there. Maybe you should even draw a line in your presentation between criminal law, civil law, and administrative law. So administrative law is not for people. Okay? It's not for people. Administrative law is for government agencies. Between people, between organizations, we have criminal law, which has to be 100% in order to get a conviction. And civil law is basically solving an argument between two parties using money. All right? And most questions of your CISSP will be in civil law. All right? Now, as we look at computer crimes, and this is what we're here to look at, okay, the CISSP, the definition of computer crimes can be clear in the eyes of legislators, but it's not, it can never be clear to courts because it's very hard to get the hard evidence. You know, it's not, you never have a smoking gun in computer crime. You have to catch the bad guys red-handed with the hands on the keyboard and so on and so forth. So it's not easy, okay? That's why courts face a lot of problems, a lot of challenges in the path to charge people with computer crimes. And some of the computer crimes are considered criminal crimes. And remember, criminal crimes, we need the 100%, okay? So again, there are difficulties there. The difficulties in prosecution are also getting the evidence, and we will get back to this in Domain 7 when we talk about forensic and investigation. It's also the understanding of the laws and the meaning of computer, or the way computers work in the eyes of judges and lawyers. They're not technical people, all right? So when you explain to them the technical details, it's like explaining senior management technical details, you lose your crowd and you lose your case. Okay, so there are many difficulties there. And we need to remember that as we deal with computer crime. Computer crime can be anything of this list and even more. The white collar hacking, stalking, terrorism, identity theft, social engineering, and whatnot, okay? So computer crimes in your questions can be anything that is wrongfully done by one party against the other. And now when you want to take it is the civil laws, okay? However, there are many other laws that are criminal laws and administrative laws, and we'll look at them. We'll look at some. First one is the CFAA. The CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, is there to protect computers used by the government or the interstate commerce from variety of abuses. Okay, so it's there to protect the government's computers. It's a law against us, the civilians, that want to harm the computers of the government. There is the other side of this, the Computer Security Act. Okay, whatever ends with act is a law in the states. The CSA, the Computer Security Act, now requires the government to do everything that they need to do in order to protect their systems. You see where this is going? The CFAA is against the attackers. The CSA is against vulnerabilities. This is for threats. This is for vulnerabilities. All right? So the government holds the government accountable here to protect their system. They cannot hide behind the CFAA. And then there's the Government Information Security Reform Act, which basically in the US gives a framework and asks any US government to run an assessment, risk assessment, cybersecurity risk assessment, to have a CISO, okay? To have a set budget for cybersecurity, and basically to do what they need to do in order to protect the government computerized systems. This one is relevant to over 84 government agencies and government bodies in the US. 84,000, okay, government bodies in the US. each one of them is required to have a CISO. So if you think about, what to do next after you pass your CISSP exam, maybe you can apply for a job in the US. I know that they're missing a lot of people there. Where are your smiles? What is wrong with you people? Come on. We're almost there. We're almost at the end of this slide, this presentation, almost at the end of domain 1. Don't worry about it. Break is right around the corner.
So that's essentially half the what do you call it, CISSP candidates. Because
What's that again?
there's a total of 156,000 CISSP people in the world. So half of them are working for the US government.
No. In the US alone, there are 73,000 CISSPs.
Okay.
Most of them do not work for the government. They consult the government. They do not work for the government. See, they make more money from the government by consulting it and not by working for it. I personally worked for the government in the US. But that's a rare occasion that you have a CISSP working for the government. You make more money by consulting it. That's as simple as that. Okay, so worldwide, looking at computer crimes worldwide, we look at the cooperation between countries, between the European Union and the United States, and many countries around the world cooperate today in security crime. The challenge is still there. We don't have a universal law for computer crime. Each country writes their own laws and has its own legal system, and you cannot expect a country to work the same as the other. So this is another challenge that we face along the way of persecution. Another side of laws and regulations are these 4 areas, these 4 topics that we will need to understand as part of the CISSP. First one is rights. This for is because this relates to data classification. Okay? If my company is Coca-Cola and we have the secret formula of Coca-Cola, we need to protect it. Okay, so what does it mean? How do I translate the law and regulation of patents and trademark and trade secrets? How do I translate this to a security word? So that's why we need to understand this 4. So let's go over this really quick, but there are going to be questions in your CISSP on this 4, okay? First one is copyright is anything that you create. You create as your own original work. It can be books, articles, poems, songs, even this presentation, even this bootcamp is protected by copyright. And as you can see here in the presentation, it says professional copyright protected presentation. So you need to tag this, you need to make sure people understand, but you don't have to, right? You want people to understand that this is copyright protected. So copyright protected is protected in the US by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, which says, when downloading music was big in the world, people violated copyright everywhere in the internet. I don't know if you remember this, but we had Napster, we had iMesh, we had all this P2P technology to download and violate copyrights everywhere. And everyone downloaded songs from everywhere in the world and movies and that. So by that year, what's that?
iMesh?
iMesh, yes. You remember iMesh?
Really?
And
How old are you?
It's ancient, right? Emu.
and LimeWire.
Yes, how old are you?
Yeah, and we still have that e-donkey and emu and yeah, everything. So the problem was that before this act went into place in 1998, the creators, the artists, they filed lawsuits against the ISP, the internet service providers, and they said you provide the infrastructure to violate our copyright. And the internet service provider said, it's just like you go and file a lawsuit against Microsoft for someone using Windows or Office to write a virus or some sort of a malware, right? I simply provide the infrastructure. Porsche or Lamborghini, they simply sell you the car. They don't tell you to drive fast or violate the law, or drive, faster than you're allowed to. They simply provide the infrastructure. The same thing for the ISPs. So that was their argument, and in 1998, the U.S. legislators passed this Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, and they said those internet service providers are protected from copyright violation of their users. All right, so this is really important to remember. The next one is trademarks. Trademarks are the signs that connect our brain, connect our understanding to a product. The same thing we have for the arches of McDonald's, we have for Starbucks, we have for slogans, okay? Anything that can trigger your understanding of a product, of goods or services of a company is under trademarks. And then in patents, what the CISSP wants you to remember is that a patent is protected for only 20 years from filing date. So as you file your request for a patent, it can be reviewed for a few months, maybe a couple of years. You are protected 20 years from filing. From the moment you file, and it doesn't matter where you get the approval, you get the patent number. When you file your patent request, you get a patent pending number, okay? From that point, we start counting 20 years, and after these 20 years, the patent goes public, okay, and everybody can use that. So you're protected for 20 years from filing. The trade secret are what make companies unique. For example, we talked about Coca-Cola and the secret formula of Coca-Cola. That's what makes Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, as we know, right? We want to protect that trade secret, and trade secrets are hard to protect because they're mostly stored on computerized systems, and that's where we, the CISSPs, come into to help the organization protect their trade secrets. How do you do that? With every possible measure, including administrative controls such as NDAs, okay? Make sure your employees sign the NDAs, and as closer as they get to that asset that you want to protect, you want that NDA to be more thorough, more in-depth, and more protective of your business. So these are the four areas, and again, talking about trade secrets is how you can protect those property rights. There are some laws in the book that you will need to elaborate on, going deeper, but I just put some of them here, some of the most important ones, some that you can expect to meet in your CISSP exam. But there are others in the book, and I encourage you all to go and read more about this in the book. So the first one is Economic Espionage Act of 1996. This one says, if you steal the secrets of your organization and pass it on to another organization, that organization can, your original organization can file a lawsuit against you and ask you to pay them or compensate them, monetary compensation for their loss, okay, for violating their trust and secrets. However, if you sell it to a country that is in trade with the US, guys, pay attention here, because this is important, this is relevant. This is previous US president craziness, okay? Sorry, didn't mean to bring up politics here, but pay attention because this is relevant. IC loves asking about things that are relevant for today. Okay, so you can expect questions about the COVID-19. You can expect questions about the trade war between China and the US, okay? And this is the area, okay? So if an employee leaves an American corporate, takes secrets, and pass it to a different country, they now are facing criminal charges, and they can actually go to prison, okay? This is big. It's the same law, it's the same act, Economic Espionage Act, but different angles. If you sell it inside the US, the civil law will probably direct to a monetary compensation. If you sell it to another corporate outside the US, now we become proud Americans and we want to freaking get you in jail. All right? That's a big one. Privacy Act of 1974. 1974, everything happened in the US, all the revolutions, it's past Vietnam War, it's past segregation, black and white and whatnot, and rights, the woman's right to vote, and everything happened in the US. So 1974, legislator realized that we need to protect privacy. That's where it all started. They said, okay, what does the individual look like? What do we need to protect? How do we provide the protection? From there, certain states took it to the next level. For example, California took it to the next level to protect medical information of individuals. This was part of the HIPAA. HIPAA is a law, federal law, to protect medical information of individuals across the United States, and California took it to the next level, saying for data breach, we're going to hold that organization accountable in such a way that they will probably need to make sure beforehand that the business associates that they work with are also obligated to the HIPAA and the requirements. So the state of California added to the federal law. Okay, so we had federal law called HIPAA, and the state of California added to it. From that, we continue to privacy and privacy in general, privacy in the US and EU. There is a cooperation between the two, and we basically called it back then, before GDPR, we called it safe harbor between the EU and the US. This is previous to the GDPR. The 7 principles of the safe harbor are these, and as you look at it, you can probably notice the elements of the GDPR. GDPR went into enforcement in 2018, and we all know GDPR, we all know what it says. It's the privacy of the individuals with everything they do and everything that categorizes them. So as you look at privacy, think GDPR, think US, and think, protecting the individual's right to privacy. My private information in the CISSP is my property, okay? My personally identifiable information is my property. No one can trade it without my consent, without my agreement, all right? And as we deal with private information inside organizations, we need to provide the same protection also for employees and for customers and for third parties, vendors. Vendors, they put in front of us the individual, the representative that will work with us, right? So if we keep that individual's information, we want to protect that as well, okay? Take it under consideration. So the question about privacy can come from different angles in your CISSP. Either your clients, individuals, which is pretty obvious. If you're a medical facility and you keep medical records, you need to make sure privacy is protected for those individuals, but also for your employees, people that share information with you. That can be another angle of the question. And the tricky questions can ask you about your vendors or third parties that you work with, all right? So there can be a different angle for the questions. Now, ISC wants you to know a couple more things before they can say that you are qualified CISSP. There is what we call a compliance convergent methodology or framework that we can work with. Instead of having all these regulations and all these standards, and the book of law is that long for us, there can be a unified approach for compliance. It's called compliance convergence. And that compliance convergence is represented in a compliance program that we build. It basically says that for all the controls that we need for privacy and security, we find the yellow brick road, that can be applied for all requirements. So if PCI speaks about PHD, cardholder data, and HIPAA speaks about PHI, protected health information, if I implement the controls here for access controls and here for access control of the CHD, I can probably implement just access control and protect them both. That's called unifying your controls. Okay, compliance convergence. Do you see that? And you can use the UCF. That's a free free tool that you can use out there. Just type UCF in your Google and you get that. To be able to pass your CISSP exam, you will have at least one question about the CISSP ISC Code of Ethics. Read that, all right? Read my lips. You need to read the Code of Ethics. Legend says that ISC put at least one question in every exam that is taken from the Code of Ethics. And before you take the exam, you sign and you agree to the Code of Ethics of ISC. Now, if you enter the exam and you fail that question, that means that you didn't read the Code of Ethics. That means that it can fail you. So before you take the exam, read the Code of Ethics of ISC. It's not too long. It speaks about these principles. You know, you wanna promote the profession of security. You want to you know, help others, support others, and you want to keep everything legit. All right. Read the Code of Ethics before you register for the CISSP exam. All right. Okay, guys. We are done with domain 1. Yay! 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 Okay. So, any questions from you guys, or you just want to take a break?
No questions from my side.
So what if I have a question here. What
Sure,
if
go
a
ahead.
company makes some faulty software which affect the peoples? So on what kind of and in you know, in what criminal law the company I mean in what law the companies will face?
What
Is it
law
criminal?
company can use against an employee?
No. If a company commits a mistake by providing, for example, Boeing created a faulty software and which lead to crashes and a lot of people lost their lives. So you know, is there any law against an enterprise who commits this kind of faulty mistake?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Those are criminal laws more than civil laws.
Criminal laws is only for people's right. For an enterprise, what kind of law is there for enterprise?
No. For enterprise laws, we also have criminal laws. For example, you can look at Enron back in 2001, when they put the SOX in for enterprises. Enron violated so many rights of so many individuals that, you know, they went bankrupt, they turned down the organization, and they got lawsuits, you know, as big as their heads. But you can definitely take criminal laws against enterprises as well. Those to pay the price for the criminal laws are the executives, more than ever these days, when they hold accountable those executives, those senior management, those shareholders, right? So we can definitely get enterprises under criminal law.
Okay.
All right. All right. Great, Jaga. That was a great question. Guys, let's take a 20-minute break, right? Because I need to drink some water. So 20-minute break. We'll be back here 10:43. All right. Good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'll see you soon. 20 minutes.